prostata sa gnoma velenva ilemate, va susretanu sarásala bíli druga velala lume, na unkve, lonava unkve obrazanu na výša Etherica Sylvaeron.
In a place where epic expanses intertwine with scientific imagination, we'll encounter races from other planets, both good and evil, and peer into the higher etheric energies that permeate our material universe. The frequencies Alexander left in the information packet within the consciousness of the 5 chosen Sylvaerons were not mere codes. These were instructions for the total deconstruction of being on a molecular and etheric level. They precisely mapped the changes in non-material and material states in which their bodies and sparks would reside during the journey and stay on planet Earth. None of them could recognize the first frequency. Although the Sylvaerons had mastered thousands of levels of etheric communication, this vibration was something they had never seen or used in their millennia-long history. They did not know how that code would affect their bodies, whether it would disintegrate them into nothingness, permanently alter their genetic structure, or lead them into spheres from which there is no return. There was only one inevitable certainty: to reach Earth unnoticed by its dark, predatory guardians. They had to test these codes in the higher etheric energy. The eldest elder Lymera, whose consciousness was most resistant to frequency noise and whose life spark shone with the most stable glow, made a fateful decision. She would be the first to activate the code of that frequency, taking upon herself the burden of the first breakthrough into the unknown. Preparations began in silence as Sylvaeron slowly sank into the purple haze of binary dawn. The air was saturated with the scent of crystallized dew and the quiet song of the biosphere, which sensed the departure of its highest consciousnesses. They headed toward a remote mountain meadow, a location known to them as the place where the planet's resonance flows most purely into the ether. The journey to that destination was an introspective passage through the heart of their civilization. They passed through the canyons of echoes, where crystalline cliffs vibrated softly, reflecting their feelings mixed with the fear of the unknown. Each traveler carried a silent mental record of home, the scent of luminescent forests, that specific blend of ozone and floral ether that accompanied them as they climbed toward heights where the air becomes so pure one can taste light itself. This was the place chosen to be their secret gateway, the point where they would test the frequencies, prepare, and from which they would embark without farewell to the rest of their kind, on a mission that defied all the laws of the guardians and the elders. Xy'lar rode at the head, watching the light of the 2 suns refract off the leaves of luminescent trees, realizing he might be seeing home in this form for the last time, feeling the weight of the responsibility of piloting through a space that was no longer what they believed it to be. To maintain absolute secrecy and ensure their intent remained hidden from the collective consciousness of Sylvaeron, they exclusively used their wild horses of light. These magnificent beings bore no resemblance to the biological life forms encountered on lower worlds. They were condensed forms of the planet's natural ether, powerful, slender, and imbued with liquid light. Their manes shimmered in thousands of shades of white and turquoise, and their eyes were slits into the very core of the universe. Their gallop was absolute silence. Their hooves did not strike the material ground, but glided over the frequency levels of the planetary field, leaving no energetic traces that the Academy's monitoring stations could register as the movement of beings. It was a conscious choice of old alternative methods of movement. Riding the horses of light guaranteed that no sensor would suspect the movement of the five of them, as they acted like a natural flow of the planet's energy. Sylvaeron felt every muscle of his horse as an extension of his own will, while Xyltha, touching the silver skin of her companion Sylvaeron, tried to calm her own spark, which was pulsing faster than usual. Each step of the horse was like the flickering of a scalar string, carrying them faster than any material being could conceive, through forests that sang a frequency of peace, unaware that this peace would soon be replaced by the heaviest disharmony. After a long journey, they arrived at the destination, high on the mountain peak where the grass glittered like scattered stars under the influence of the two suns, confirming they were mentally and physically completely alone. The silence on Villian was so dense, they could hear their own thoughts echoing in their minds. Mentally, they activated their higher etheric suits of aquamarine turquoise colors, which instantly merged with their aura, becoming an inseparable part of their energetic structure. In a collective breath, they dematerialized and dived into the depths of the higher etheric energy. Lamira addressed them mentally, her voice as steady as the mountain from which they transitioned into the higher etheric energy. I will be the first to set the first frequency if my information disappears or my essence disintegrates, Sylvaeron. It is your solemn duty to immediately pull the crew back to Sylvaeron and report to the other elders all that we have discovered. You must not attempt to follow me into nothingness. Sylvaeron, Sylta, Thaera, and Ernos gave their silent consent, feeling their sparks tighten under the pressure of unprecedented risk. In the information when Lamira activated the code on a mental level, she visually ceased to exist. For the other four, a total informational vacuum was created where their mentor had been. It was not a common disappearance into a phase shift that the Sylvaerons used for ambushes. It was an absolute break of every resonance. Their mental sensors frantically searched the surrounding ether, but found not even the thinnest echo of her presence. Elloran felt a moment of primal horror, thinking that Lemira was permanently erased from the register of existence, leaving them alone on the edge of an abyss. The feeling of abandonment was so strong that their shared telepathic link flickered for a moment. Thera tried to project her consciousness into deeper layers of energy, risking her own stability, but encountered only a mute void that absorbed her every thought. However, in the same information, within the higher etheric energy, Lemira returned to her normal form. She appeared exactly where she had vanished, and her being radiated a high frequency that acted like a pulsating sun in the darkness of the ether. Mentally, she gave them an urgent signal to immediately materialize back onto the planet Sylvaeron, to the same place from which they started. As soon as they felt the solid ground of the mountain under their feet, Lemira staggered, and her aura pulsed with chaotic colors, from deep indigo to fiery gold. When she finally regained her composure, she transmitted only one thought that echoed in their heads. This is not possible. Although she was several thousand cycles older than each of them, despite having spent thousands of cycles studying the etheric books and listening to testimonies about the abilities of the most advanced civilizations and entities of pure light, like the Lyriel Dawn, nothing had prepared her for this kind of total frequential transformation. She explained that under this frequency in the higher etheric energy, she didn't just hide, she transformed into a scalar string. She became the very medium of movement through which information flows in the higher etheric energy. She was no longer a traveler using the ether. She became part of the etheric infrastructure itself. She could create a shortcut to any part of the material universe in a fraction of information, receive the consciousness of entities traveling through the ether into herself, and collect data from every scalar wave pulsating nearby. What was most wondrous was that in that same information, she could simultaneously be in the present, near past, and near future, without pulsating in the higher etheric energy, blurring the boundary between what is and what is yet to be. She perceived the higher etheric energy as an endless network of information where she was one of the key threads, capable of sensing the imprints of the consciousness of entities that had passed there millions of cycles ago. She could not believe that a man from a categorized stone dweller civilization possessed codes that turned Sylvaerons into the very core of the higher etheric energy. This realization triggered a process of deep questioning of their entire history. For thousands of cycles, the Sylvaerons, together with their allies, had carefully categorized civilizations and entities in the material universe, believing that this system was the foundation of their understanding of civilizations and entities. Lamira mentally projected that table into the crew's consciousness, but this time with a dose of doubt permeating every item. Initial civilizations, stone dwellers, new, young civilizations at the beginning of development, their path and moral compass are undefined, subject to influences. For Sylvaerons, they are the potential of the Golden Chain's future, beings in need of subtle guidance. We believed we understood them because they were below us, never suspecting that their simplicity could hide incomprehensible wisdom that rules the very structure of the ether. Aggressors, hunters, civilizations focused on conquest and technological supremacy, like the Kaelnar, they are a direct physical threat to harmony. Their auras are dark red, emitting a frequency of destruction that feels like heavy pressure on the spark, sucking joy from every space they occupy. Consciousness, parasites, vampires, entities that do not conquer territories but suck the energy of sparks of other beings. Examples are the Xel'thas Morphi, who infiltrate societies and spread darkness through conflict and fear. They are energetic parasites that change the resonance of entire populations for their own survival. Traders, mediators, civilizations focused on the trade of genes and resources, technologically advanced but immoral. Their influence is destabilizing because they sell powerful technologies regardless of consequences. They are often the bridge over which hunters enter peaceful systems. Their sparks are pale, flickering, always in search of the next information that carries material gain. Guardians, allies, civilizations like the Aelthos Korra, like us Sylvaerons, dedicated to the preservation of life and freedom. They are our comrades in the Golden Chain, whose sparks resonate in harmony with our turquoise frequency, keeping watch on the edges of the void. Light travelers, etheric entities, or highly evolved consciousnesses that dwell in matter to spread light. They are the inspiration of the universe, bearers of hope, who prove that matter and ether can be in perfect balance, feeding on the energy of stars. Lamira concluded with bitterness. It is surreal. I would never have thought this possible, but nevertheless, the frequency exists and functions perfectly. None of the entities could sense me. They traveled over me without knowing they were treading on a living material being that had mimicked itself into a scalar wave through the first frequency code. They realized that the mission to Earth was an operation of the highest risk, where their consciousness would be tested in a way no Sylvaeron before them had experienced. If Alexander believed they had to become the path itself, the scalar wave itself to arrive, what horrors then monitored the approaches to Earth? All five were deeply confused, a feeling that was not in their nature, but they decided to proceed. They decided everyone should undergo training for the first frequency. on the meadow of Villian, while the silver tear cast long shadows over the turquoise grass. Thera and Ernos experienced a terrifying failure in their first attempt. Their sparks, accustomed to the solidity of combat forms and steadfast defense, could not accept the loss of individual shape. As soon as the code began to stretch them into the informative thread of a scalar wave, their consciousness would shrink in resistance, causing them to instantly materialize back on the meadow with a loud sound that resembled the breaking of crystalline rocks. They were roughly ejected from the higher etheric energy, feeling nausea and disorientation that lasted long after those failed attempts. Sylvaeron watched their struggle, realizing that here it was not physical strength being tested, but the ability of total surrender. Every time they tried to hold on to their self, the ether rejected them as a foreign body. Nevertheless, persistence prevailed under Ziltha's empathetic guidance, which helped them calm their sparks and accept the fluidity of consciousness. Everyone finally experienced existence as an informative thread. Every time they became scalar waves with the first frequency, they collected so much data in the higher etheric energy that they felt they were upgrading and becoming wiser faster than through entire cycles of learning in the academy. They could receive echoes of past lives and flashes of the future. They saw a scene in which the 5 of them addressed their kind on Sylvaeron, handing over knowledge that was so exalted that other Sylvaerons seemed like shadows to them. But one piece of information was hermetically locked. None of them could see themselves, nor the other members of the team, when they were handing over all the knowledge to their kind on Sylvaeron in the information, nor the future of the mission on planet Earth itself. They saw periods before and after it, but the stay in that solar system was protected by an impenetrable code, as if Alexander himself had forbidden insight into that part of their destiny to preserve their coherence. It was as if traveling through a dark tunnel where light exists only at the entry and exit, and the interior is reserved for pure experience. After this experience, Sylvaeron, Ziltha, Thera, and Ernos tried the second frequency. Part of the code was familiar to them from ancient camouflage techniques, but the way Alexander modified the frequency was radical and changed the very essence of their biological resonance. They set the frequencies and, with a slight quiver in the very fabric of the air, which smelled of ionized energy, all 4 materialized into beings radically different from humans and Sylvaerons. They transformed into animals from planet Earth. Sylvaeron materialized into a powerful dog of black, shiny fur, whose senses transformed in an instant into instruments for detecting material sense. He felt the weight of his own paws, the moisture of his nose, and the urge to listen to the tiniest material movements. His vision became different, focused on movement and shadows. Ziltha converted into a graceful tricolor cat whose movements merged with the silence of the room with eyes that still retained that calming Sylvaeron glow hidden under the veil of instinct. Thayera and Ernos materialized as two small, fluffy, and playful kittens. An incredibly sweet mental communication occurred among them. Eleran wagged his tail, feeling an instinct that his intellect could not immediately process, while Ziltha purred through the telepathic network, joking about how they were now just shadows in the grass compared to Lemira, who watched over them. They wondered how humans would react to them and if they could keep the scent of Sylvaeron hidden under earthly fur. They felt the strength of muscles tuned to Earth's gravity, aware that in these forms they were more fragile than ever, but also more imperceptible to those who stalked them. Every movement of their ears or twitch of a tail carried a code they had to learn to control. But the eldest elder, Lemira, was most surprised that the frequency under which the crew resided did not give away the colors of their sparks at all. Alexander's code was so perfectly written that the sparks of top navigators, which usually shine with the strength of stars, now pulsed with animal intensity. They were dull, low, and perfectly imitated a level of consciousness that was almost exclusively instinctive. It was a total deception, such as the Sylvaerons had never seen in their lives. They were completely masked, not only physically, but energetically. No one, not even the most sensitive sensor of entities in the higher etheric energies, could suspect that consciousnesses governing etheric flows were hidden within these beings. Alexander explained to them through the previously submitted information that these were noble animal species that enjoy the special love of people on Earth, and that this would allow them unprecedented freedom of movement and observation. However, he also left them the most difficult note, which vibrated in their consciousnesses with special weight. While you are in these forms, and especially at the moment of materialization, absolutely control your feelings. Do not let anything surprise you, for a single flash of true Sylvaeron joy or rage can pierce your mask and activate the sensors of the hunters who monitor planet Earth. This instruction was the hardest part of the training. Eloran had to learn to suppress his righteous anger, and Ziltha her all-encompassing empathy, turning them into mute echoes of their own being. After several cycles of intensive training of both frequencies on the secluded meadow of Mount Villian, they were ready for final departure. However, Lemira still carried the seed of doubt in the depths of her consciousness. She had been an elder too long to blindly trust someone without a spark color. Mentally, she addressed the crew. Before we all embark into the point of no return, as Scalar waves in the information, we will go to Alexander's house. I want us to observe the terrain, to be absolutely sure of what we will actually encounter. We must know what these frequencies are for and what we are actually hiding from. Her thoughts were propped by protective care, which was the foundation of her millennial authority. they prepared and entered the higher etheric energy. They switched to the frequency of scalar waves, synchronously activated the coordinates toward the distant planet Earth, and in the same information, they were created inside Alexander's living room. From the perspective of the higher etheric energy, they observed him from the height of the room's ceiling, invisible and imperceptible to any material instrument. Alexander was sitting in his comfortable armchair, holding his wooden staff in his left hand, while in his right he held a pottery vessel and slowly drank a warm beverage. Everything looked peaceful, almost meditative. The air in the room was saturated with the scent of tea and dry wood, creating an atmosphere that felt exotically warm to the Sylvaeron. And then Alexander did something no one expected. He slowly raised his head toward the ceiling, looked them straight in their sparks, and smiled benevolently. He knew they had arrived. He knew exactly where they were, even though they were only scalar waves of information that no one else in the material world and the higher etheric energy could register. Then, leaning back in the armchair, he slowly returned his gaze to the fireplace where the fire crackled, continuing his silence. It was a moment of supreme, quiet authority. Without a word, he showed them that his consciousness was awake at levels that were unfathomable to their instruments. In the information, they gathered what they could and materialized back onto Sylvaeron. When they returned to the mountain and mentally removed their suits, they looked at each other in absolute astonishment. They had even more questions than at the beginning. How did Alexander know they were there? How could he see the invisible? As they approached the beautiful blue planet Earth in scalar form, they sensed the information that the entire solar system was wrapped in some kind of protective barrier. However, that barrier was not made to prevent entry from the outside. It was designed to prevent the views of the civilizations living within that system. It was a protection that kept the residents in the dark, not allowing them to see the truth about the universe surrounding them. They felt dense layers of evil hiding behind the cloak of that barrier and the planets in this physically distant part of space, a frequency that tore at their subtle centers. Despite the fear that permeated them, they were determined to go. They were Sylvaerons, and their nature was the search for truth, no matter the price. After a couple of nights' sleep, during which their minds feverishly processed what they had seen, they were ready for the final departure. They wanted to discover all the information waiting for them in the material cosmos, determined to return and transform their own world with what they learned. They knew this mission was key to the survival of all free beings in the Golden Chain. Each crew member summoned in themselves the image of those they loved, turning that love into propulsion for the uncertainty awaiting them. One evening, while the sun's silver tear was at its zenith, casting a turquoise glow across endless fields of crystal, they gathered again on that same meadow. the place where Alexander first appeared to the crew. They looked up toward their turquoise higher etheric barrier, and further toward the distant stars they saw in the sky, beautiful and elusive. A joint mental monologue occurred. They admired their beautiful planet, luminescent forests, crystal streams, and everything material surrounding them, which breathed in perfect harmony. They sighed deeply, aware that they might be smelling the scent of their own home for the last time. They changed into higher etheric suits, which softly adapted to their bodies. Without any thoughts, they stood motionless, with their eyes closed for several long informations, gathering all their will into one point of coherence. Then they opened their eyes under the higher etheric suits. Their pupils shone like galactic cores and looked at each other. They were ready for the jump. In a moment, they dematerialized on the meadow and found themselves in the higher etheric energy. They synchronized the coordinates and then switched to the first frequency of scalar waves and set off on an unknown path toward the distant material cosmos. The journey was an information, but propped by data of the darkness that thickened as they approached the goal. They felt the density of the space around Earth, the resistance the network offered to every foreign information, like thick syrup through which their sparks had to pass. They appeared in front of the blue planet Earth, beautiful but wounded, and then, in the same information, they were created inside Alexander's cabin. The eldest elder Lemira remained in the first frequency of the scalar wave to keep watch, becoming an invisible part of the interior, while the crew in the information switched to the second frequency. They materialized on the warm wooden floor of the living room. Eleran, Ziltha, Thaera, and Ernos felt grounded. Everything was familiar to them: the warmth of the fire, the smell of tea, the texture of the wood they had previously dreamed of. They looked at Alexander, who stood in front of them, acting like a colossus compared to their new animal bodies. His aura was a calm harbor in the storm of disharmonies they felt as soon as they materialized. Alexander looked at them with a gentle smile, then carefully lowered himself to his knees. He began to stroke them caringly, transferring the warmth of his hand to their furs. Mentally, he explained to them that this was a normal greeting of the human species with animal species on planet Earth. They felt the weight of his hand, but also an incredible peace radiating from him, correcting the tiny cracks that the journey through the zero dimension had left in their sparks. "Welcome, far travelers. My house is now yours too," Alexander transmitted mentally, and that voice carried the weight of entire eons and indescribable fatherly warmth. Alexander continued the mental monologue. "Relax now. I know you are tired and hungry. I know you have countless questions for which you have no answers. For your safety, I will share information with you exclusively while we are in a protected astral projection during sleep. That is the only way to transfer a huge amount of information in a short time, while remaining invisible to those who do not like us. Their sensors are tuned to the waking consciousness that emits clear frequencies. In dreams, we are on neutral territory that they still cannot fully map. Lemira listened to their conversation from the scalar frequency, feeling indescribable awe. The crew was now so close to Alexander, but none of them could register his spark color. It didn't exist. It was not visible in any known spectrum. It was as if he had mastered a kind of protection no one in the history of the Sylvaerons had met. It was the brilliant Zero. Although they mastered spark vision and recognized millions of civilizations, even those using avatars in which the controller's spark colors are seen, until now, they had never seen a being whose germ of consciousness was completely transparent. Yet, in his presence, they felt unmistakably safe. They could not take their eyes off him. His body was illuminated by a radiant white aura, subtle yet omnipresent, which radiated frequencies that corrected every dissonance in their thoughts. It could be seen that he was a man, but it was known that he was not just that. Elleran asked mentally with wonder, "Alexander, how can your body be empty without information about origin? We do not see your spark, yet you radiate an aura that currently reveals you to us. We are navigators of light itself, and you are an enigma to us." Alexander replied to him in an information, "I was born here, on the soil of this planet. I am a man, but I show the aura only to those I trust. All in good time. The truth is currently heavier for you than the gravity of this planet, and your mind must absorb it slowly." They had many questions, but knew they had to be patient. They noticed that Alexander did not have abilities like theirs, but he communicated mentally without a single effort, penetrating directly into their core. They also knew he possessed information greater than they could ever have imagined. Alexander said to them with a smile, "Feel free to walk around the house. You recognize every corner of it from your dreams anyway." The words took them back to the vision of the cabin, and indeed, as they sniffed the corners, which was a new and strange animal instinct, they recognized every detail. The wooden table, the pottery cups, with the traces of the fingers of the person who made them, the smell of dry herbs hanging from the ceiling. They felt safe, as if this had truly been their home always. Every object in the house had its story, and a peaceful resonance of bygone times which differed drastically from the sterile perfection of Sylvaeron cities. In the meantime, Alexander brought small pottery vessels with food and water for each. "Refresh yourselves in these bodies. I know you are hungry and thirsty for matter, and this will help you ground yourselves. Material food will stabilize your sparks in these animal forms. After eating, we will go outside. But I warn you, behave frequency-wise normal. Outside is not like in the house. Although it is visually beautiful, you will feel terrifying disharmonies as soon as you step off the terrace. If you feel uncomfortable, return slowly inside. Everything must look normal, without sudden movements and panic. The crew was uneasy. They wondered what could be so terrible outside if the scene they saw through the window was so idyllic. After they ate and rested, they headed toward the well-known back door of the house. Alexander opened them. They stepped out onto the terrace, the same one they had dreamed of, and the view was beautiful. The cabin was located on a mountain in a beautiful meadow full of fragrant meadow plants and flowers. The meadow was full of life. Birds were singing songs that did not know the ether. Colorful butterflies fluttering around flowers, and in the distance, forest animals like deer and squirrels could be seen observing them with innate caution. They stepped outside the house and stood on the earthly soil. In front of them, a stream murmured with a small lake where trout with a silvery sheen shimmered in the setting sunday. The air smelled of pine, moisture, and life, a sensation that would be the pinnacle of beauty under normal circumstances. But the delight and wonder did not last long. Stepping off the terrace, the crew was seized by a shudder and discomfort they had never felt before. They felt a great disharmony that on planet Earth had a terrifying evil weight. The planet did not breathe in harmony. It pulsated with the fear and sorrow of billions of extinguished sparks of this civilization, like one continuous mute cry echoing in the ether. Alexander had a wooden house far from people, but the entire planet pulsated with the great evil of beings and entities that held the entire civilization under control. They felt the influence of evil beings and entities they knew very well through the Etheric books, but here they found them in full strength. The first were the Geltos Morphae. This insidious reptilian race possessed the ability to change their physical form to perfect mimicry of other beings. They infiltrated leading positions on Earth, manipulating human societies and hindering their progress for their own hidden goals. They had technology to collect sparks that wanted to return to the source, using them as fuel to power their dark multidimensional technology. They were true energetic vampires who fed on fear and conflict, sucking the very life core of the population. Then they felt the Rictar Jenna, the Lords of Dissonance. These insectoids acted slowly and imperceptibly, using advanced biotechnology to gradually change the genetic structure of civilizations, ecosystems, and the climate of Earth itself. Under their influence, entire worlds began to resemble their conquerors, losing every individuality and becoming mere extensions of their collective dissonance. And the most terrible of all the Umbra'n Noxa, shadowy entities that moved among dimensions like ink in water, infiltrating directly into human minds, taking their sparks and feeding on life force to the point of total destruction of hope. They were the reason people on this planet seemed so lost and afraid, even in moments of material prosperity. In the same information, the eldest elder Lemira saw and felt all this from the scalar frequency. She saw the battles of other advanced federations and Umbra'n Noxa entities. Federations of good races, guardians, and light travelers were trying to help people but were completely powerless against the evil races of hunters, vampires, and the powerful Umbra'n Noxa. She saw how these evil entities entered the bodies of good beings of that federation, breaking their spiritual being and turning them into lifeless shells of dark, gray, extinguished sparks. The sparks of those who came to save now served as batteries for their jailers. In the material world, Lemira noticed one spaceship that mimicked a bright green comet. It was an old civilization that set out with a crew toward Earth to contact humans and land on Ganymede, Jupiter's largest satellite. But the evil forces were too powerful. Umbra'n Noxa entities intercepted the ship near planet Mars, non-materially entered the hull of the ship, and possessed the entire crew, putting them under the total control of darkness. The bright green ship became a death trap that continued its path toward the exit of the solar system. The environment of this system resembled the most sinister, predatory playground, a trap for any prey that would try to approach. In the information, she watched the first scout, a probe without a crew, that the evil entities intentionally let pass to lure the real crew into an ambush. Lemira now knew that the Umbra'n Noxa were at a much more powerful level than was written in the books from the time when her civilization fought them on Sylvaeron. Their technology of capturing sparks was fast and precise on an energetic level. In the material world, Sylvaeron and his crew, alarmed by the realization that they were fragile in the bodies of small animals against such evil, quickly returned to the house. Every step of theirs on the ground felt like walking on glowing coals of emotional dissonance. Alexander followed them, calming them mentally. "You are safe in the house. It's time for sleep. In astral projections, you will find out the whole truth about this system." Alexander knelt, stroked each of them, transferring additional peace through touch, then took his wooden staff and went to the bedroom. The crew settled into their 2 comfortable beds, Sylvaeron in one and the other 3 in the second bed, feeling their sparks slowly calm down near Alexander's energy. As soon as they fell asleep, they found themselves in a protected astral projection with Alexander. Everyone was turned toward each other in an endless space that radiated pure white. The crew realized that Alexander had such a strong will that he could shape this space as he wished, creating a frequency cover that none of the evil entities could break through. "Who are you, Alexander?" Sylvaeron asked, his astral form bright and flickering with excitement. Why did you contact us? Why exactly this evil place? Every time we saved other civilizations, they had questions for us. Now, we have countless questions for you, a stone dweller from Earth. Nothing matches in our maps of the universe. Alexander addressed them with deep seriousness. You have absorbed a lot of information coming here. You felt the evil pulsating under your paws, but I did not call you to save Earth, because force is not the solution here, but so that you could transfer your experiences to the Sylvaerons and allies. Currently, I see you as lost deer in a forest ruled by predators that occupied this system more than 92 cycles of your generations ago, which is close to 2 million human years. That is how long this agony and utopia, which was skillfully hidden from all those who lived and came here, has lasted. So listen to me carefully now. Alexander revealed to them that human civilization is only 15,000 years old and was diverted from the path of development from the very beginning. Their genes were stolen from a good civilization and modified so that they live briefly and forget quickly. Humans are addicts to material crumbs. After they are born, they are given a name, religion, and nationality, so that they spend their whole lives defending a fictional identity instead of developing spiritually and recognizing their connection with the source. Genetically, they are made to use the planet without knowing they were deceived. Gods and religions were inserted for them to pray to wrong entities that appear to them as divine beings. That was a perfect recipe for constant wars and instability of civilization. Immediately after birth, the fear of death is instilled in them, which prevents them from exploring the breadth of their being. Throughout history, exceptional people were born who were a threat to the evil forces. They wanted to give their civilization their knowledge of free energy, food, and transport. But the evil forces declared them insane, took away their inventions, and threw them into oblivion. The evil forces controlled even the process of forgetting those persons, some as if they never existed in the records, while the stories of others were changed for generations until they became unrecognizable. People think they possess planet Earth, but they are given only small crumbs of hope and alien technologies to maintain the deception. Those crumbs are given to them through accidental crashes of spacecraft and found artifacts, so they think they have advanced, while actually reverse engineering is performed, which serves only a narrow circle of subjugated power holders. The technology they see as progress is the instrument of their hypnosis, Alexander continued. Nuclear and hydrogen weapons, as well as wandering energy technology, attract other races only as a signal of warning of chaos and destruction. Quantum computers accelerate control processes, self-monitoring, analysis, and reporting technology, or, in short, smart devices They are obsessed with deaden their brains with a mountain of irrelevant information, keeping them in cities like pens for livestock. They distort their minds with morbid materialism, distancing them from nature and the silence in which the source is heard. Alexander deepened the horror. The greatest deception is the huge underground particle accelerators. To people, it is presented as science for finding the God particle, but portals are located beneath them. They serve the main entities, which the Sylvaerons did not detect, to move unhindered between the material and multidimensional world, escaping from the guardians from the higher etheric energies. Those portals are the paths used by evil races and entities to move toward other planets where similar horrors are occurring. The crew asked who the main entities were, and Alexander replied, Xy'lar Kael. They are above the Umbra'n Noxa in the dark hierarchy. These are powerful entities that manipulate fundamental forces with motives incomprehensible to mortals. The truth is terrible. People on this planet are trapped livestock with an expiration date. Evil races use them for the trade of genes with civilizations that are dying out, for feeding certain races that worship human meat, and as a drug. In moments of extreme fear or stress, adrenochrome is extracted from human adrenal glands, which is the most expensive drug among the evil entities. That's why the civilization must be under constant tension, in fear of fictional enemies. Evil races possess underground incubator human baby farms deep below the surface of the planet, where systemic cultivation of energy is performed. The Sylvaerons felt physical pain in their astral bodies listening to the scale of evil. Lemira saw rivers of dark energy in the ether flowing toward the underground bases. Alexander continued about the so-called natural Earth satellite, the Moon. The Moon is a massive artificial incubator brought here 2 million years ago. The Xy'lar Kael created a simulation of the higher etheric energy in it to steal the sparks of deceased civilization individuals. They monitor them, clear their memories, and forcibly return them into new bodies through reincarnation, not allowing them to return to the source. They literally feed on your sparks while preparing for the great deception of the source itself. They even made a reverse scalar shield around the solar system so that no one, neither the higher entities nor the source, can see what they are doing. The Moon is the center of their operation, a fake celestial body that is the heart of the prison. This is the 46th civilization in a row in this system, Alexander said coldly. Every 40,000 years, which is 2 of your generations, they sow a new genetic modification. Each civilization lasts 15,000 years, and then they destroy it with accidental cataclysms, nuclear wars, asteroid strikes, or controlled movement of the Moon that causes tsunamis, earthquakes, and volcanoes. The entire civilization is eliminated, even those in the deepest bunkers. After each elimination, the erasure of the civilization, terraforming of the same planet is performed, which lasts about 25,000 years, and the cycle begins anew. Only a few powerful families know the truth and cooperate with the evil forces in exchange for returning into the bodies of the powerful, who will again lead the next generation of slaves. The Rictargena insectoids are in charge of each subsequent civilization being lower in stature, having shorter memory, and living shorter, on average 70 to 80 years. Humans are terrified of death because that fear was instilled in them as a primary control mechanism, a barrier that prevents them from seeing the eternity of their spark. They have forgotten that, as sparks, they were not afraid before they were born on planet Earth. Lamira saw the confirmation of Alexander's every word from the higher etheric energy. She saw the black probes monitoring the entire solar system, and the smart stones on Earth sensors, masked as nature, that were in constant communication with the black probes. Those stones transmitted every change in resonance directly to the hunters in orbit. In the information of the future, she realized that the vibrations of discomfort of her crew on the meadow outside the house had activated these stone sensors. The hunters found out that uninvited travelers had somehow pierced the barrier. She saw the information of the future. Alexander will sit in his armchair and drink tea, and she will, as a scalar string, create a distortion in his wooden staff to warn him of the arrival of trouble. She saw uninvited guests in physical bodies of people, agents, phantoms, appearing in front of the cabin door. She was ready to enter the house in her true form to protect the crew, but the code blocked the further flow of information, leaving the outcome in the darkness of uncertainty. Lamira was in the present, in the room, behind the thin veil of the higher etheric energy. Somewhere deep in the icy interplanetary space, one of thousands of black probes, receiving a signal from the smart stones from the mountain, changed its rotation. Its dark, high-frequency sensor, slowly and ruthlessly, turned toward the coordinates of the cabin on the mountain. The probe's pulsing became more intense, sending a signal to the Xy'lar Kael entities about the breach in quarantine. Lamira, hovering as an invisible scalar thread in the higher etheric energy above the roof of the house, felt that cold, predatory focus that crashed onto their position. She realized that the isolation was broken and that the interference mesh had begun to pulse in the rhythm of discovery. The danger was not near. It was there. Lamira said to herself mentally, in the silence of the ether that no one in the material world could hear. We are discovered. The mesh is tightening. Spread the word that we are already here, among you. Your awareness is the bridge that allows us to move beyond the silence and helps you rediscover the deep strength that has always been within you.